Welcome to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Jonathan Evans.
And I'm Ashley Thompson. This program is aimed at English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
Today on the program, you will hear from Katie Weaver and Brian Lynn. Later, we will present our American history series, The Making of a Nation. But first, countries like Hungary and Turkey are growing more corrupt as they turn to governments under the control of a single person or political party. That claim comes from a new report. It also says that threats to the American system of government have pushed the United States from a list of the lowest levels of corruption. The Berlin-based group Transparency International prepared the report. Transparency says its Corruption Perceptions Index for 2018 showed more than 2/3 of countries have a rating below 50. Under the index, a rating of 100 is considered very clean, with little or almost no corruption, while 0 means very corrupt. The group reported on Tuesday that the United States dropped out of its top 20 nations for the first time since 2011. It received a rating of 71, 4 points less than the U.S. rating in 2017. The group said, a 4-point drop in the CPI score is a red flag and comes at a time when the U.S. is experiencing threats to its system of checks and balance. It also noted a breakdown of ethical norms at the highest levels of power. If this trend continues, it would indicate a serious corruption problem in a country that has taken a lead on the issue, Transparency said. It added that the issue affects not just those in power and requires a solution reached by 2 or more sides. In a comparison of the report with findings about democracy worldwide, Transparency said it identified a link between corruption and the health of a democracy. Full democracies had an average of 75 on the corruption index. Weak or problematic democracies averaged 49, and autocratic countries averaged 30, the group said. Transparency noted that Hungary dropped 8 points and Turkey 9 over the past 5 years. At the same time, it noted a report on democracy from the U.S. government-financed Freedom House. In that report, Turkey was moved from a partly free rating to not free, while Hungary registered its lowest rating for political rights since the collapse of communist rule in 1989. Our research makes a clear link between having a healthy democracy and successfully fighting public sector corruption, said Delia Ferreira Rubio, the head of Transparency. She said that corruption is more likely to take hold where democratic systems are weak and where undemocratic and populist politicians can use it for their own purposes. Transparency's 2018 report listed Denmark as the least corrupt nation with a rating of 88. Denmark was followed by New Zealand, Finland, Singapore, Sweden, and Switzerland. Somalia, with a rating of 10, was listed as the most corrupt nation. The index is based on 13 different measures that provide opinions of public sector corruption from business people and country experts.
In the year 1807, a wealthy scholar was captured in West Africa, brought to the United States, and sold into slavery. His name was Omar ibn Said. He was 37 years old at the time, and he spent the rest of his life enslaved. Said was one of many enslaved Muslims in early U.S. history. Up to 40% of Africans captured and brought to the U.S. were from mostly Muslim countries in West Africa. Said's story might have been forgotten, but he wrote about it in a book called The Life of Omar ibn Said. The U.S. Library of Congress recently received the book, which was written in Arabic. The book is one of only a few personal stories written by a slave in America. It is also one of the first intimate reports of the early history of Muslims in the United States. The book challenges the idea that the U.S. is a Christian nation, says Zahir Ali. He is a historian at the Brooklyn Historical Society in New York. Ali adds, the book opens us up to the understanding that people who were not Christian helped build the United States. Most enslaved African Muslims did not leave written records, but we can learn about their lives from public evidence and the memories of their families. How long Muslim slaves practiced their faith is unknown. Some became Christians. Others acted as if they did to better deal with their captors. But there is evidence that some remained Muslim. Zahir Ali points to burial places off the U.S. state of Georgia. Some markers of enslaved people have Islamic signs. Also there are some churches, Christian religious buildings, that face east, the direction Muslims face when they pray. In addition, some family members say they remember their ancestors using Islamic rugs and prayer beads. Sylviane Diouf is a writer and historian of the African diaspora, or movement from homeland. She says enslaved Muslims also influenced American culture. Diouf says slave work songs used beats like those used in Quran recitation and the Islamic call to prayer. She points to the song Levy Camp Holler. It helped give birth to the musical style called the blues. And Zahir Ali says the banjo and guitar could have come from a traditional West African musical instrument. But the most lasting evidence of Muslims in the United States may be a movement among modern African Americans to join the Islamic faith. Black Muslims continue to make up the biggest part of the Muslim community in the U.S. Ali concludes, Islam is not new to the United States. It was here before the country was founded. It was present among the people who helped build this country, and it has very much been a part of the thread of America's story. I'm Katie Weaver.
A new report predicts up to 25% of American jobs face a high risk of disappearing due to future machine automation. The report was recently released by the Washington-based Brookings Institution. Researchers identified about 36 million U.S. jobs as having high exposure to automation. Among jobs facing the greatest risk are those in office administration, production, transportation, and food preparation, the report says. Jobs in these fields may be replaced with technology driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence. Mark Murrow is a senior fellow at Brookings and the lead writer of the report. He told the Associated Press that people in these jobs will need to react to these changes to survive. That population is going to need to upskill, reskill, or change jobs fast, he said. Murrow said some of the jobs could disappear quickly, within a few years. Others could last another 20. The report predicts job losses to machines will be greater in smaller cities and communities, especially in parts of the U.S. Midwest. The highest job risk is expected to be in Indiana and Kentucky. Both states have some communities where nearly half of workers are employed in the manufacturing and transportation industries. Wisconsin, Ohio, and Iowa are also expected to suffer large losses. On the other hand, large cities in the U.S. Northeast, including Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, will see much lower job losses to machines. Young people who work in the food services industry and other low-skilled jobs face an especially high risk for automation. Mark Murrow said jobs aimed at assisting the public will increasingly be turned over to robot helpers. Restaurants will be able to get along with significantly reduced workforces, he said. In the hotel industry, instead of 5 people manning a desk to greet people, there's one, and people basically serve themselves. Underrepresented minority groups are also likely to be affected by machine automation. Young workers and Hispanics will be especially exposed, the report predicts. Among the jobs with the lowest risk of being lost to automation are in business, engineering, social services, education, and management, the report found. Some economists believe machine automation has an overall good effect on the labor market. Mateus Cortes is an assistant professor at York University in Toronto, Canada. He was not involved in the Brookings report. Cortes told the AP that automation can create economic growth, reduce prices, and increase demand. He also said new jobs can be created to make up for those that disappear. However, he added that there are likely to be clear winners and losers. In the recent past, those hardest hit were men with low levels of education who held manufacturing and other blue-collar jobs. 2 main groups of women were also affected: those with lower levels of education and those working in administrative positions not requiring high skills. I'm Brian Lynn.
Welcome to The Making of a Nation, American History in VOA Special English. 1860 was a year of mixed feelings of hope and fear. Americans had hope for the future because they would be electing a new president. But they had fear that even a new president could not hold the nation together. The states of the South were very close to leaving the Union over the issue of slavery. Tony Riggs and Frank Oliver talk about the candidates and the issues in the election of 1860.
After 4 years as president, James Buchanan decided not to run again. Buchanan was a Democrat. His party, like the nation, was split over slavery. Southern Democrats wanted the party to support slavery. Northern Democrats refused. The opposition Republican Party expected to gain votes from dissatisfied Democrats. Republicans had become stronger since the last presidential election in 1856. They felt their candidate would win in 1860.
The Democratic Nominating Convention opened in April in Charleston, South Carolina. Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois was the leading candidate. He had the support of a majority of convention delegates. But he did not have the two-thirds majority needed to win the nomination. Many Southern Democrats did not like Stephen Douglas. Some did not trust him. Others did not accept his policies on slavery. Douglas did not oppose slavery or the spread of slavery. However, he said no federal law could make slavery legal in a territory where the people did not want it. This was his policy of popular sovereignty.
The Southern Democrats who opposed Stephen Douglas were led by William Yancey of Alabama. Yancey wanted to get a pro-slavery statement into the party's platform. He was sure Douglas would not accept the nomination based on such a platform. If Yancey failed to get the statement he wanted, he would take Southern Democrats out of the convention and out of the party. The Committee on Resolutions considered 3 platforms. One platform declared that the people of a territory had the right to decide if slavery would be legal or illegal. The second declared that the Supreme Court had that right. And the third declared that no one did, that slavery was legal everywhere.
Your country, how came it yours? Before the pilgrims landed, we were here.
William Yancey spoke to the convention in support of the pro-slavery platform. He said pro-slavery Democrats did not want to destroy the Union. But he said someone had to make clear to anti-slavery Democrats that the Union would be dissolved if the constitutional rights of slave owners were not honored. Yancey spoke of the danger of a great slave rebellion. He described it as a sleeping volcano that threatened the lives, property, and honor of the people of the South. He said the actions of the North might cause that volcano to explode. Another convention delegate answered Yancey's speech. He said Northern Democrats were tired of defending the interests of the South. Now, he said, Yancey tells us we must agree that slavery is right. He orders us to hide our faces and eat dirt. "Gentlemen of the South," he said, "you mistake us. We will not do it."
In this atmosphere of tension, it was clear that a pro-slavery platform would not be approved. The Alabama delegation announced that, therefore, it must withdraw. The delegations from the other 6 states of the Deep South, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, did the same. Those 50 men organized their own convention. They approved a pro-slavery platform, but did not nominate anyone for president. They agreed to meet again a few weeks later in Richmond, Virginia. The Northern Democrats postponed their nomination too. They agreed to meet again in Baltimore, Maryland.
The Republican Party held its presidential nominating convention in Chicago, Illinois. There was no question who was the leading candidate. He was the best-known Republican in the country at that time, Senator William Seward of New York. The Republican platform seemed to contain something for everyone. For those opposed to slavery, the platform rejected the idea that slave owners had a constitutional right to take slaves into new territories. For foreign-born Americans, it supported their right to full citizenship. For manufacturers, it proposed a new tax on imports to protect American industry. And for those in the Northwest, it called for free land for settlers and federal aid to build roads and canals. Delegates approved the platform with loud cheers. They would return the next day to nominate their candidate for president.
William Seward was sure he would win the nomination. If not on the first vote, he thought, then on the second. But there was some opposition to Seward, and his campaign organization failed to see its strength. The candidate of the opposition was Abraham Lincoln. The Republican convention voted 3 times. Lincoln gained support on each ballot, but neither he nor Seward received enough votes for the nomination. Then, before a 4th vote could be taken, a delegate from Ohio asked to speak. The big room became silent. "Mr. Chairman," he said, "I rise to announce the change of 4 votes of Ohio to Mr. Lincoln." That was enough to give Abraham Lincoln the Republican nomination for president.
One month later, the Democrats reopened their nominating convention. Most of the Southern Democrats who walked out of the first meeting came back. Many of their seats at the convention had been given to new delegates. So a new dispute arose over which delegates had the right to be there. A compromise plan split the seats between old and new delegates. But most of the Southerners rejected it. One by one, a majority of each Southern delegation walked out. The remaining Democrats then voted for a candidate. They chose Stephen Douglas. Southern Democrats nominated their own candidate, John Breckinridge of Kentucky, and a group called the Constitutional Union Party nominated John Bell.
The election campaign opened in the summer of 1860. Lincoln was not well known, so the Republican Party published many books and pamphlets about him. They told the story of a poor farm boy who educated himself and, through hard work and honesty, had become a candidate for president. Lincoln's supporters organized a loud and colorful campaign, complete with marching bands and signs. Lincoln himself was silent. He said, "It has been my decision since becoming a candidate to make no speeches. I am here only to see you and to let you see me." In fact, it was Lincoln's assistants who had advised him to say nothing. They believed he had said enough in the past to make clear his position on the important issues.
Stephen Douglas, on the other hand, campaigned very hard. His health was poor, and he had trouble getting money, but that did not stop him from speaking in almost every state. Within a few weeks, however, Douglas recognized that he had no real hope of winning. His position on slavery had cost him all support in the South. Douglas believed that, of the other candidates, Abraham Lincoln had the best chance of winning the presidential election. He also believed pro-slavery extremists would use Lincoln's election as an excuse to take Southern states out of the Union. So he turned his efforts to a campaign for the Union itself. He said, "The election of a man to the presidency by the American people under the Constitution is no reason for any attempt to dissolve this glorious nation."
Election Day was November 6th. The popular vote was close between Lincoln and Douglas, but the electoral vote was not. Lincoln received 180. Breckinridge received 72. Bell received 39. And Douglas received just 12. Abraham Lincoln would be the new President of the United States. He would enter office facing the most serious crisis in American history. For before his inauguration, Southern states finally acted on their threats. They began to leave the Union.
And that's our program for today. Listen again tomorrow to learn English through stories from around the world. I'm Jonathan Evans.
And I'm Ashley Thompson.